Okay, welcome everyone. Great to be here with you. Very exciting close of an incredible 2 days, and I'm really thrilled to have some incredible executives with us from some incredible organizations. Starting with Sara Bowen, who's the VP of Global Equity, Diversity, and Inclusion from Boeing. Welcome, Sara. Great to have you with us.
Hi, David. Great to be here.
Thanks so much for making the time. We'll hear from you a little bit later in the session. And Sonia Webb from Avanade, so fantastic you could join us as well. Sonia is the CFO of Avanade. If you don't know who they are, they're a large organization, over 50,000 people, partnership between Microsoft and Accenture, and doing some of the incredible work out there on digital transformation. Welcome, Sonia.
Thank you, David.
Thanks for making time in your busy schedule. And David Taylor, who's been the CEO of Procter Gamble for some years, just recently transitioned to executive chairman, has done some incredible work there. And David, again, thanks for making time for us here.
Happy to be here, David.
Thanks very much. So we'll come to you in a few minutes. David, we'll start with you, and then we'll hear from Sonia and then Sara. I just wanted to lay some foundation, first of all. So this session is called Change in Weeks, Not Years. And it's actually the mission of our organization as well. So at NLI, we work to make companies better for humans through science. And change in weeks, not years is our central mission. And you know, with everything we do at the summit, it's a culmination of a lot of thinking over a long time. And what I'm going to share with you today is actually a culmination of 10 years of thinking around a particular topic, a decade. And if you're thinking about change in weeks, not years, you're thinking about real organizational change. First you need a definition. So very simply, it's the process of becoming different. But in order to actually become different, you require believing that change is possible. So if you're going to become different in any way, you actually have to believe that change can happen. And this is, in any domain. And this brings us to something that we increasingly believe is really foundational for any kind of big change initiative in an organization. And that is to start with shifting the mindsets more in this direction, shifting everyone's mindsets to believe that change is actually possible. And this is a domain that has been around for a long time. In fact, the early philosophers started to notice that people's beliefs about whether they can change or not impacted their performance massively, all the way back from Aristotle. The 1970s, late 1970s into the 80s was the first research on this concept of entity theory versus incremental theory. And entity theory being that you are fixed in one way, and incremental being you believe you could change. And these academics noticed that people had one of these two beliefs, and it had this really profound impact on their performance. Carol Dweck popularized this, brought this to schools with her book Mindsets. And literally 10 years ago, we started bringing this to organizations and started doing some really deep work in this space. And it's this concept of having a growth mindset as opposed to a fixed mindset. And we've published widely on this, initially with a paper called Organizational Growth Mindset, and many, many other industry research papers and other studies since then over this last decade. And along with Procter Gamble, helped some really amazing organizations around the world embed this across literally, in the end, probably millions of people now over the last decade. And what I wanted to do is kind of just anchor on what it is for those who are new to it, and very, very briefly. Then we're going to hear David Taylor's journey at Procter Gamble, obviously. But so what is a fixed mindset, first of all? So no one has universally a fixed or growth mindset. We're all a mix of them, right? But a fixed mindset is this belief that you're innately gifted in some ways and not others. So, for example, I noticed I had a fixed mindset that I just was not a reading music person, that I'm much more of a kind of improvising person. And so I believe that just wasn't me. I'm just not that kind of person. So I believe that was innate, that skill. And that, my dad likes to improvise and he's quite musical, but he's not really a music reader, right? So I had this unconscious belief. That's what it is. Now, from this belief that you're either innately good or not, in that domain, whether it's music or technology or hybrid work, whatever, from this belief that you're either, innately good or not, from that belief, you basically think you can't change much. And the result is you really kind of dodge feedback. You certainly don't seek it. You avoid stretch goals. Like if you're not good at something, why would you want to stretch? And also positive role models actually make you feel less confident, not more confident, which is interesting. So, if you're in the business of trying to inspire your leaders, and they basically believe that leadership is something people have or they don't, then there's no point putting them in a training program in a way. There's no point giving them a positive role model or really giving them much feedback, because it all kind of washes over. If people believe that they're just not really leadership material because leaders really are born, it's not something you can get good at, right? Everything you do kind of doesn't help. So we've really come to see over a decade just how foundational this is. And P&G, we've done this really widely, but also Microsoft, it's been their foundation of all the work that they've done to transform their culture, which has gone incredibly well. At Hewlett-Packard and many, many other organizations now, they've seen that this is such an important place to start, because when you shift people to a growth mindset, things really change. And if a fixed mindset is a desire to kind of look good because you're not really that good, a growth mindset is this desire to get better. And it's this belief that something can be developed through effort. It results in seeking more feedback, in taking on stretch goals, and now positive role models help. So, this is the concept, right? That we all have a fixed or growth mindset about everything. But over a decade, we've discovered some really fascinating things as we've practiced this. And as we've taught, I should know the number coming into this, maybe my team can tell me. It's in the hundreds and thousands or millions of people we've taught this to. But, as we've done this, we've discovered some really interesting things. And we've been looking over our data. The first thing is people find really deep value in this insight. And they find that at work, but they also find it at home. And the number of people who've said to me, wow, this has changed my relationship with my kids or my partner or my exercise regime, like it's in the thousands of people. So this has an effect on people's whole of life, which is a great thing. But at work, it also has an effect on all aspects of their work, making people more resilient, more productive, but also more creative, and even more inclusive. It's probably one of the really important foundations to creating more inclusive practices and less bias, because people are much more open. So people find deep value at work and at home. Really amazing thing we've discovered is that the core habit of noticing a fixed mindset shifting to growth actually embeds quite quickly if you do, if you give them the right amount, even with the minimum viable product, it pretty quickly embeds that people get the concept and start shifting it. And the other exciting thing we discovered is that these habits can truly last. So I'll show you a couple of data points and then we'll get to David. So this is a couple of our big research studies. So this is a 2,136 person case. 98% of people after learning growth mindset feel more effective in their role. Now that's interesting, but what does that really mean? Well, the second data point's the real important one. 88% of people, this is 3,800 people, found that every week they were shifting from fixed to growth at least 1 to 3 times. And what's fascinating is about a quarter of people said they did it just about every day. So this is about 2 to 4 weeks after learning about it. 2 to 4 weeks after learning about Grow, 88% of people, more than 3/4, are shifting from fixed to growth mindset literally 1 to 3 times a week. They're noticing it and they're changing it. And this has a profound effect downstream on really everything that they do. So you teach this to people, they actually change. And I actually remember being in Cincinnati with David's team. I think there was a room of like 300 people in the auditorium. And I actually came back to do a follow-up growth mindset session. And I said, I think it was about 6 months after I'd met them, how many of you are still doing this weekly, still noticing a fixed mindset shifting? And pretty much everyone put up their hand. I don't know, it's just because David was there watching, but I think pretty much everyone put up their hand and was doing this 6 months later. But let's look at some actual data. We went back to an organization we'd worked with, and 6 months after learning growth mindset, with an audience of 571 people, we found that we went from 88% only down to 79%. So literally 79% of over 500 people were now still activating a growth mindset at least 1 to 3 times a week. So this is lasting. in a really significant way. And you can see 91%, that's my favorite one, 91% of people weekly, these are weekly habits, are now sharing mistakes or learnings with others. So, we're in the habit activation business at scale. And for us, a habit means you do it weekly. It's something that's, very much a part. So that's, background. So we're really excited. The habits do stick, and they have a really big impact on the culture in a whole bunch of ways. But that's enough from this, David. Let's go to the other David. David, come on screen here. I'll maybe turn off the slides for a minute, and let's talk a little bit about your journey at P&G. I guess firstly, maybe briefly, why did the organization need to change? I know you've just had a solid stint as CEO. Why did the organization need to change when you started there?
Well, first, it's happy to be here. If I go back 5 or 6 years ago, P&G has been, we've been around for 184, 185 years. So we've had a very long, and in many ways, very distinguished past. But the previous 5 years, if I go back about 6 years ago, we were delivering mediocre to bottom half results, which was very uncharacteristic for the company and certainly not consistent with the capability of our outstanding organization and the portfolio of brands we have. We had a portfolio that had gotten more complex, an organization that was a bit frustrated and a lot of overlapping roles. And the mindset and the external voices people were hearing was language like mature company, startups were cool, low growth categories. And you look at all of that, and I know that wasn't what our company was capable of. And so we knew we needed to change, and we started with the strategy and organization.
It's interesting. I remember when we first met and kind of talking about this, one thing that really stood out for me was that you made this conscious decision to I think the word you used was unleash. You made this conscious decision to unleash the potential in your people, not to change all these people out. Can you talk more about kind of where that decision came from and a bit more about that?
Absolutely, because a number of big companies, when they're under pressure, especially if you get things like we did, face an activist, the first thing they want to do is aggressively cut costs. And you hear about layoffs and doing things, cutting roles. And that wasn't our issue. We had an outstanding group of people. The issue was the environment in which they were operating was difficult. Both our strategy was too extensive, i.e. we had spread ourselves too thin globally. And we were in an organization that was designed 15 years ago or more that over time, as we grew, got more and more complex. And so what we decided was we needed to change just 3 main things. One, let's focus on our US and our top 10 markets. We call them the focus markets. They made up 80% of our sales, 90% of our profits. If I go back previously, we were expanding all over the world in many markets that were very small. We're taking a lot of time, management resources and money. Second, we had to go back to saying we want to provide superior products and packages and communication and go-to-market capability and value. Not good, not competitive, but meaningfully better that delights the consumer, and get back focused on him and her that we serve. And third, we needed an organizational transformation and create an organization that was agile, accountable, and empowered. We knew we had great people. We had a very strong leadership team, but we weren't performing up to our potential. So those 3 choices were made, and we communicated it broadly. We didn't deploy it to the organization. We enrolled the organization. We went and shared with them, listened to them, let them give feedback, and then said, now with this, we have the capability, when executed well, to win. If I go back 8 years ago, we were in the bottom 25% of our industry. Today, we're in the top third of our industry in the past 1, 3, and 5 years, and we'll be there shortly on past 10 years as the organization continues to deliver outstanding results.
Yeah, it's fantastic. I mean, I love that you wanted to really bring this out of your people, not just change them out and just change the strategy. And, is that you believe they had a lot more potential. So tell me, when you first heard growth mindset from us, I think I personally delivered to you and your team and others. Tell me about some of the effect that this idea had on you and sort of how you found yourself using the concept in sort of day-to-day terms.
There are many, many applications. If I think about it, the strategy was what we needed to do. How we needed to do it was to work with our people in the mindset of the culture within our company. And even things like superiority, people would say, we want to be superior brands, so we'll take share. We said, no, the growth mindset, let's grow the category. Because when you grow the category, you don't hurt your competitors per se, you take the majority of growth. And in doing that, you actually create more profits for the total industry. Your retailers don't care whether you grow in share versus your competitor. Your retailers want you to grow the category for them. So the growth mindset was take each element of the strategy and how do you turn that? So the US, it's not a mature market, it's a growth market. It's the greatest growth market in the world. We've gone from 2 to 3% growth to more than double that in the last 3 years. And we have tremendous upside. We just need now the capacity to be able to deliver it. And we take the second one, which is superiority. How do we grow markets? Very different. On an organizational transformation, it wasn't about cutting cost and cutting, roles. We wanted to grow faster. In many cases, transformation is viewed as success is reducing costs. Success was sustainably growing faster in a way that lifted all of our people and our customers, consumers, and many stakeholders that depend on us. And so it was just a very different view of what success was. And in many of the things you just talked, we ended up just working these day by day, week by week on focusing on growth in a way that empowered people to accomplish things, in many cases, they didn't think they could.
Right. So it's literally you're applying the mindset to your overall strategy, even that you're not thinking that there's a fixed, market out there, that you're thinking much more expansively. And I love the way you're including the, retailers and customers and the end customer, even that you're trying to, grow for them. That's fantastic. And what about some of the things, when we were chatting earlier, you were talking about some of the stories of kind of when you were kind of calling this out in people. And we've talked about that over the years. What are some of the instances where you'd sort of call out a fixed or growth mindset and you were kind of nudging individuals or the organization?
There's many, many examples, and all of us deal with folks on a day-to-day basis, but whether it's goal setting, where you hear, we haven't done that before. I said, fine, we haven't done it yet. What would it take to do that? We don't have, we can't launch the product in a year. We haven't launched it in a year, in the 12 months in the past. The yet word we used many, many times, and we wanted to switch from being encumbered by the past to empowered by what's possible. And the idea of a company with our capability of 100,000 people, a portfolio of brands that are trusted, in many cases loved by consumers, the financial wherewithal to be able to do almost anything that we could envision. We said, no, we have assets that should allow us to do amazing things, and especially wanted to confront this idea that startups have an advantage. David, they're fast. I said, let me step back. We have hundreds of PhDs that know the categories better. We'll have 1,000 times the capital available. We have people that know the category, industry, relationships with customers. So tell me what advantage they have. It's us talking to ourselves. And to me, it's the fixed mindset. It's just closing off the possibilities. You flip that 3 years later, and you look at the results we're delivering. We've launched new brands. We've gone in new segments. And in many ways, we're taking advantage of the incumbent categories that we have, our advantages we have. And more than anything, what we've done through the organizational change is move a lot of the decision-making and control closer to where the consumer is, closer to where the customer is. We've realigned probably 6,000 people from reporting to the central part of the organization, to the businesses and to the markets. And in doing so, you just saw people unleashed. And the human capacity of our organization is enormous. And arguably, there's so much more we can do as we continue to enable people that have the desire to win, the desire to grow. And we just got to create the environment to do that. The strategy was about what, growth mindset, and some of the other changes we made are about how.
Right. And I mean, how many times did you find yourself using yet? I know when we ran into each other, I'd be, often asking you that. How many times did you find yourself using that? Was it an hourly, a daily, a weekly, a monthly? How often?
It was many, many times, both frankly at work and others. The yet is a fun way to trigger a conversation about this on possibilities. And it's not just yet. Certainly, anytime somebody said can't, can't shouldn't be in our vocabulary. And usually can't is lazy thinking for I don't want to, or I don't know how to. And so people translate that, David, we can't do that. Well, we haven't done it yet. But what would be the set of conditions where we could do it? Well, we'd have to do, okay, good. What else? It may not be right to do, but all of a sudden you're into the problem solving and thinking possibilities. Another one is just the language we use. When people say we need to reduce 100 roles or 100 heads is the one I hate. So disrespectful to the people that we work with. Our job is to create the environment to unleash and grow the company, and just changing the language away from, our job is to cut costs. Certainly we have to be prudent spenders of all of our assets, but the real opportunity is to unleash the people and to delight consumers in our world, and certainly to meet our customers' needs and the many other stakeholders. But even things like talent, we've moved, and Ann Schulte talked, I think, yesterday to some portion of this. She's done an outstanding job with this. It's everything from changing from just evaluate, where you're judging people, to move almost all the energy to development and think about the impact people have. And typically many companies, including us, you identify the high potential people. Our job is to unleash the potential in every single individual that works for this company. Whether you've been here a year, a month, or 35 years, you have the opportunity to learn and grow. And I'd argue many of the things you just talked about are very consistent with that. Many of these things we were working before. Growth mindset gave us a common language that we could share broadly in the company that would, I would say, accelerated many of the changes we were making already. We were into possibilities. We were in many of these other areas I'm talking, but I really like growth mindset is clear. It is simple to understand, very hard. Actually, it's not even very hard to bring to life. It's just challenging to get a large group of people at scale to change. But what we've seen, certainly, and the results speak for themselves, is the company has moved from relatively slow growing bottom third of our industry to top 25% of our peer group. And even the employee surveys that we do, you've seen people feeling better and better, more confident in the strategy, confident in the leadership, and a stronger connection to our company.
That's great. Thanks so much, David. I think just to close off there, and we'll hear from Sara and Sonia, I'm sure they've got some questions and comments. Just a quick comment. I think what growth mindset does is it gives people like a sticky, easy to use framework so that they actually do shift their mindset weekly.
Yes.
Like we sort of know we should, but the power of the way we sort of framed it, where it's really it's easy to recall under pressure. Right? The concept has been simplified enough that it's easy to recall under pressure, so it actually gets used. And I think that's the big difference here. Thanks so much, David. We'll hear from you, and love to hear your comments on the other cases in a few minutes as well. But let's go to Sara first of all. Any reflections on the P&G case and story there? Anything you'd like to ask David, or questions or comments, Sara, and then Sonia?
Well, I was just really resonating with what David shared about, using yet and challenging the can't. And that's something that we talk a lot about too. Don't stop at no. Think about, start with yes, and then figure out how to get there. And that's such a growth mindset, a way of thinking, but it's also so empowering and leads to such creativity and innovation. So I love the P&G story, and just really resonating with it. Thank you for sharing it, David.
Thank you.
Thanks, Sara. Sonia, any reflections there?
Yes, I agree completely with that. I was jotting down, David, some of the words you were using: the yet, no can't, the empowerment, really unleashing talent across the organization. And we're at Avanade a little early in our journey. I'll talk about that in a little while. So it was just really nice to hear such an impactful description of what went on at P&G. So thank you.
Fantastic. Well, let's go to chapter 2, and sorry, my computer just did something kind of crazy. Give me a second, and we'll go to chapter 2 of the kind of next part of the story. So, to summarize, I think that growth mindset is the place to start. If you're trying to do change in weeks, not years, if you're trying to change a whole culture, growth mindset is such a critical foundation to start with. And it's not like everything will go wrong if you don't, but it lays a really, really strong bedrock in order to do anything else that you do. And increasingly, we're seeing more and more of our big partnerships with organizations kind of starting at that place, or if not, it's woven into the framework in a really deep way. So let me kind of build on that foundation and go in a slightly different direction for a couple of minutes. Then we'll hear from Sonia. And I want to talk about rapid change at scale. So our business at NLI is not about helping 1 or 2 leaders change or a top leadership team. We think in systems. We think in a 100,000 person system. And we think in terms of how do you change that system as quickly and powerfully as possible. And, a lot of the hypotheses around that are sort of, really influence the top team, and then hopefully it will trickle down. We would much rather do something that impacts everyone in an organization quite quickly. And you'll hear more from Sara about that in a few minutes, but we'd rather kind of impact everyone in a powerful way. So I'll tell you how we think about change at scale. And it's something that we've been studying for a long time. We've been thinking really deeply about this question of whole system change rapidly. So firstly, we anchor on habits. So we're interested in the habits that change. And with P&G, one of the central habits we built was the habit of yet, of adding yet when you hear something. But habits live nested inside two other things. So in order to get change at scale, you need to create a set of priorities, build the habits the way they need to be built, then install the systems that support that. So there's kind of three types of work that needs to happen in order to get system-wide change. And with this work, it's really important to actually think about building habits the way that the brain requires. And for me, the simplest way to say that is you've got to build habits that have easy recall under pressure. In other words, if a habit takes a whole lot of effort to remember, the game is up. And that's why yet is so powerful, because it's so accessible, right? You use it so many times. We did a lot of work with Stanley Black & Decker a few years ago. They produced over 1,000 new tools a year. And the success of the tool correlates to the number of times a week the tradesperson uses it. And in a similar way, we want to develop tools people use all the time. And that literally comes down to how easy it is to recall under pressure, not during easy times, right? Which means it needs to be super, super simple. So a lot of our work ends up taking really complex insights, complex science, and actually making it super easy to apply and really digest. And one of the things that we've learned over the years is to get people to build habits, you need them to have strong insights about that habit. If the habit's yet, you want people to have a strong insight. You want them to do that with others, not on their own, because the information is stored in a much more robust, accessible, and long-term network. And you want to do that one habit at a time. So you don't want to teach people add yet and then also experiment and value progress and learn from others, all at once. You want to teach them about yet, then you want to come back, teach them about experiment. And then the next week, teach them about value progress. The next week, teach about learn from others. So really kind of take this at a one habit at a time approach. So this is how we design. A lot of our work with organizations starts these days with working out the P, the set of priorities. And I'll bring Sonia in to have that conversation. We've built a set of priorities together. We haven't got to the habit work yet. There's a yet right there. It's coming shortly. But firstly, Sonia, I know we also started with that foundation of growth mindset. Do you want to tell us a little bit about that? And then we'll go back to the framework. Tell us a little bit about kind of the experience at a technology company where things are very, precise and in some ways quite fixed, right? What was the experience of introducing growth mindset there? And then we'll talk briefly about the framework.
Yeah, it was quite an interesting journey for me personally as well. We were right kind of in the beginning of a 5-year growth strategy. And we had started building that out when we thought, wait a minute, we really need more transformative change in how we work. So we've grown really an amazing culture over here for the last about 21 years. But a technology company, relatively conservative, not a lot of risk taking, and really no tolerance for failure. And so we recognized we needed, and to achieve these new strategic objectives, we really needed this culture shift. And our CEO asked me, the CFO, to sponsor that work, which was a bit unusual to begin with, the CFO in this kind of particular space. Right. I was absolutely thrilled and to be honest, terrified. And the first thing I said was, we need to bring in experts to help. And you and your organization, LI, have been an incredible partner on that journey.
Thanks. Thank you. The impact, anything you're willing to share about kind of using yet and applying this, either personally or professionally, what did you find as a CFO? How did this, growth mindset affect you?
So one of the things that we've done in my finance sessions is we start a lot of the calls with, okay, let's be open and honest. Let's talk about a failure and what you've learned from that. And I give that example for me personally, but our CEO does that as well. And she's really been a great example of this. What I really love about what I've seen at Avanade is just there's such an incredible groundswell across the organization. Like I can't point to one really big thing, but you just hear it all the time. And we'll be on calls and someone will say, ooh, someone just used growth mindset. And then I also have the people that will come to me after a call pointing out someone who maybe still has a fixed mindset. So we've really created just an incredible, safe environment for people to raise new ideas.
Fantastic. Thanks for that. That's great to hear. At NLI, we're smaller than all of you. Obviously, we're about 220 full-time people, but we, for years, we've been doing what we call mistake of the month. We actually share out the dumbest thing that someone did. I'm usually in there and I often win, which is, great. In Australia, they have F up Fridays because they can say that kind of word there. But here we have mistake of the month. But it's a really powerful thing to actually focus on sharing the mistakes that made, because it shows that you want to learn, and leaders role modeling that is really important. Let's go to the framework. So, growth mindset's a foundation. Then you've got to kind of set this true north. And I'll share screen again and show this. So we developed together a framework for the really critical habits to focus on. And we got this down, as we love to do, to 3 things. We find if you can give people 3 simple things, they'll do them. Give them 4 or 5, nothing happens. So we got it down to 3 things: create the future, inspire greatness, and accelerate impact. Tell us a little bit about the journey of getting the organization around these and kind of getting everyone behind these.
Yeah, this has been, it was such just empowering for me, and also just inspiring for me to be involved in this sort of work. Because as I said, as a CFO, I don't usually get to spend time on these things. But, we really brought our entire organization in. And what we're going to be focusing on now is to build that, you said muscle memory at the leadership levels, because we really need our leaders to role model these behaviors and make space for all of our employees to really be enacting the change. And I couldn't be happier with the engagement and the level of energy and enthusiasm from our leaders globally. They're really taking this, to heart and making it their own. And so it's really been incredible.
Yeah, no, fantastic. So let me, maybe I'll take it off screen for a moment, and let's hear from David and Sara. Any comments, thoughts, questions for Sonia, kind of on the framework? David, did you want to weigh in there first?
First, I love the thought of changing low tolerance of failure to something we see it as learning. One of the things I've often believed, the only real failure is an absence of learning that's applied to the next thing you do to make it better. Because if you redefine failure, then you're happy to share what you learned. It is a path to success as opposed to a endpoint. And to me, it's a growth mindset way to view it. I also love that Sonia, as the CFO, is leading a growth initiative. I think it is wonderful for companies to role model those in those kind of roles that may have a view by many others as being more cost focused, to be the person that's about creating value, recognizing the human potential that exists in an organization, which Sonia highlighted. So I think it's a great example of applying the principles, both in assignment on who leads, and I'm sure it's because of your leadership, but also just busting up some pre-connote any norms that may exist in a company around whether it's failure or what roles, because any role can lead almost anything. It's the human, the individual, the leadership, the passion that drives it, much more than the title.
Yeah, no, that's great. Thanks, David. It's interesting that, growth mindset, you can make it a priority, you can build habits, you can install systems. And, one of the systems work that's really important to do is looking at your hiring and promotion systems, that they're actually really, stretching people. And, there's a fixed mindset way of hiring, which is make sure you hire the person with the most experience for the job. A growth mindset way of hiring is hire the person that this would actually be a really exciting stretch, and they've got related skills, but they haven't done this before, because they're actually going to bring a fresh perspective and a lot more energy to it. And it's a really different way of thinking about hiring and promoting, and you end up with a much bigger talent pool to hire from as well. So you're hiring for stretch opportunities or promoting for stretch opportunities, not just for the person with the exact skills for the job. So, from a systems perspective, you want to look at hiring, you want to look at performance management, of course. You want to look at, of course, learning and development massively, workforce planning, all of it. You can put all of it through the lens of, where do we accidentally have a fixed mindset and where could we put a growth mindset? We actually built an assessment in the last few years for that. We call it a coherence analysis, where we kind of mystery shop all your talent processes and show you a heat map of where you may accidentally have a fixed mindset happening. It's a really interesting journey. Sara, any comments for Sonia there on the Avanade story? Anything you'd like to dig into?
Yeah, well, the same phrase resonated with me, that low tolerance for failure. I think many of us can relate to that at our companies. But I'm really curious, Sonia, how you have managed to sustain these behaviors. How have you managed to embed them and make sure that they're durable for your workforce?
Yeah, so what I'll say about that is some of this can be quite fragile. And what I mean by that is it's constant reinforcement. If you think about something, if you took some risk and you had a failure and you got your hand slapped before, proverbial hand slap, in your company, you're going to be a little bit shyer about trying again. And so it's really this nurturing of all of this that has started at the top of our organization. Leaders are really modeling it so well. I mean, because this was somewhat of a new, something new for me to embark on, I didn't really have a set of expectations, but I've just been overwhelmed at how we've been embracing, in particular, when we look across our principles. Like, I love all of them. So it's just been, it's been great. I think it's a lot to do with the way we've embedded it, like just a little bit here, a little bit there, just in everything that we do.
Yeah, it's got to be made a priority. Then you need to build the habits and the systems. And I brushed over this before, but there's an overarching habit of, add yet, which is about noticing and shifting, right? But then there are 3 specific habits that you really want to build one at a time, spending at least a week or 2 in each. And one of those is experiment, and really weaving in this willingness and passion for experimenting. The second one is value progress, and weaving in this real passion for not trying to get things perfect, but continually looking to get better, and looking at the journey that you've been on. And then the third one is learning from others. And a really powerful skill there is actually asking for feedback, where you get so much learning from others that you would never, ever get otherwise. So kind of asking for feedback halves the threat level for both sides of the equation, and makes the feedback much more likely, much more frequent, much more helpful, and much more pleasant as well. So those 3 habits, are super important to kind of build those. Avanade, it's sort of early in the journey of embedding this framework into the organization. We just kind of finished building it, but we wanted to share it. What I will say about Avanade, and then we'll go, Sara, to you in a second. It's such an interesting case. And one of the things that really inspired me about the organization is the CEO actually wrote to me and said, I want a session with you to know how to do this properly. And I got on a call with her, and she actually said, I want you to tell me how to actually live a growth mindset. Like, tell me how to live and breathe this really in my organization, because I can't pretend to role model this. I want to actually role model this. And she was really serious. And we actually talked through over an hour, what it really took to make this a priority for yourself, what the habits were. And we brainstormed all these different ways. And then, I can hear, it sounds like she's already done a bunch of things at a system level, which is great. But she's really, really serious about personalizing this and really owning it. And it was really inspiring to hear. All right, so let's change gears a little bit. Thanks so much, Sonia and David, for the comments. Stay with us. I want to go to Sara, and let's hear a little bit of the Boeing story. And maybe, Sara, you can share kind of how this journey started. I think you told me briefly some of that, but tell the group, kind of how did this journey begin? Aside from, obviously there were some challenges there, but how did you decide to kind of go this direction?
Yeah, absolutely, David. So our journey began in 2019. This happened to be the year I joined Boeing, but it was also a year of tremendous crisis for the Boeing company, because it was that year that 2 of our MAX airplanes were involved in fatal accidents that took the lives of hundreds of people. That set in motion the most intense and justified scrutiny you can imagine from both outside the company as well as inside. It also set in motion immense grief, grieving not only for the lives lost, but in a sense for our own identity as a company. We began asking ourselves questions about our culture that we couldn't answer. Questions like, do people feel safe to speak up here? If not, why not? Where is the fear coming from? And how do we regain the most important currency there is, and that is trust, both outside and inside our company? You know, essentially, how do we emerge from this crisis better and stronger than we have ever been? And so it was with that mindset that a few colleagues and I attended the NeuroLeadership Institute Summit in November of 2019. We sat through the session called Voice, which is about the science of speaking up. And then there was this moment where we kind of looked at each other across the table, a twinkle in our eyes, and we said, this is it. This is what we need to bring to Boeing, the science of speaking up, creating that habit at scale. So we brought it back and we started socializing it with different groups across the enterprise. And it was really interesting, the feedback we got. Can you guess what the feedback was, David?
I don't know, too much science. We didn't build it here. Not complex enough. I don't know.
Not complex enough. Yeah.
Not complex enough.
Well, actually, people loved the science. They loved the neuroscience. But what they said was, speaking up isn't the problem. The problem is listening. We don't do a good job of listening to each other. And it was sort of this moment of course, right? Because speaking up is the natural consequence of a psychologically safe environment where people trust that those around them care about what they have to say. So then it became speak up and listen. And we worked this some more in partnership with NLI. And then I was ready to take it to our new CEO, who had been in role for about 3 months. I got time on his calendar, and I wanted to pitch this to him because I saw it not as a one-off, standalone kind of effort, but something sweeping for our entire global enterprise of 140,000 people to say, these are the habits that we need to instill to regain that trust, to work together better and emerge stronger. So I had the conversation with him. I pitched Speak Up and Listen, and he listened. And then we got to the end of the call, and he said, I really like this. I can get behind this, but there's one thing missing.
Right.
So there's something I want to add. He said, it's not enough for my leaders to listen when someone has the courage to speak up. I want my leaders to find those pockets of anxiety wherever they reside, the places where employees feel distressed or worried. Go to those places, listen to what's happening there so we can fix it. He said, if you can add that, I'll get behind this and champion it. And so in that moment, Seek, Speak, and Listen was conceived. Yeah, so here it is. I'll give everyone a moment just to look at the slide, and then I'll talk through it. So there's a lot of neuroscience, right, that NLI helped us embed in these habits, but they are really so simple, so memorable, and that's why they're so sticky, right? It's seeking, right? Seeking those moments where we have something to learn, because that's going to help us get better. Speaking up, not because we think we have the best idea in the room or we're self-promoting, but because we might have an idea that no one else has thought of, or we might have a concern that if we raise it now, we can address it before it becomes a major problem, right? Speaking up because it's the right thing to do and will benefit the team. And listening because listening is how we learn and get the advantage of the diversity of our team so that we can make better decisions. Speak, speak, and listen, 5 syllables. Even under stress, to your point earlier, David, about how habits need to be sticky, they need to be memorable so that even under pressure, you can recall them and apply them. That's what we found Seek, Speak, and Listen has done for us. And it's been so powerful, so transformative for us, so simple. Our CHRO has said that Seek, Speak, and Listen is the most significant culture effort in our company's history. The company is 106 years old. It's that significant.
Wow.
So 140,000 teammates around the globe, from Australia to Singapore to Russia to Turkey to Europe and the Americas, have gone through this together back in May of 2021. We've learned these habits together, and we are embedding them, to your point, not just in our behaviors, but in our systems, our processes, in everything we do, so that they stay and endure. And I think
That's
I
great.
have.
Let me just, we'll go to the data in a minute, Sarah, because I know you've got some data to share. I'm sure people are curious about that, but just, tell us a little bit more about kind of how you've gone about building the habits, like what's been some of the strategy to make sure this really embeds. We're all barracking for you that everything, everything is better. Everyone is excited to know that people are, speaking up at Boeing. So, how have you, because it's like the whole planet has a stake in this really working, so how have you built the habits?
Absolutely. Well, what we learned with NLI that it's one habit at a time. And social learning is the most powerful form of learning. So we rolled the habits out one at a time, one per week for 3 weeks globally. So week 1, everyone focused on the habit of Seek. And we had video, cute little video and some materials. Seek was week 1, Speak week 2, and Listen week 3. And then in week 4, teams came together in a capstone event to develop their action plans. So everyone went at once, one habit at a time, so that we were all using the same language and understood our North Star, which was the why. Why are we doing this? We're doing this because it will deliver better business outcomes and stronger teams.
No, that's great. And for those of you who know our work a little bit, it's a custom distributed learning solution. So we built this 30-day sprint that, instead of putting a few people through, the entire company went through all at the same time. We one habit at a time every week for a month. And this design is something we started playing with about 7 years ago. And as we showed earlier today, is radically more effective at actual behavior change than putting people into a whole day classroom. And all it is just small groups of people, watching a video every week for 3 weeks, and then an experience at the end. And one of the reasons it's so powerful, it's sort of non-intuitive, is social learning has this massive effect, especially if it's people that you're going to see again. So if you learn something socially with people around you, you feel this positive pressure to change. But it's more than that. If you learn the ideas of Seek and you learn it, watching a video on your own, it stores in one part of your brain. But if you learn that and watch that and talk about it with your team, for example, Seek, then your brain also tags into that memory of the habits. It actually tags in who was there, how they were feeling, what was going on, what you were doing that day. So all this automatically encoding social information is now attached to something that takes more effort normally. And so when you learn in a social context, you essentially kind of tap into or piggyback on automatic encoding that happens. And so this becomes much, much more sticky. And then the benefit of doing one at a time, over 30 days, and just 3 things, is you can get this, really powerful stickiness. So we haven't done this enough. This is our favorite kind of project, where we're able to work out exactly the right habits and scale it across a whole company, all at the same time. And we'll show the data in a minute of just kind of, what's possible when you do that. Did you find any resistance to kind of, having something so simple as you rolled this out, or, what was the response from people to the concept?
Yeah, I think people were sort of blown away by it, because as you sort of joked when I asked you the question, we have a tendency to we say complexify. I think maybe we made up that word. We have a tendency to complexify everything. And so to roll out a culture effort that we were really investing in from the top down, that was 3 words, and 3 very simple words, was sort of like, how could this, how could this possibly work? Right. But it's because it's so simple and so memorable that it does work. So people have been really appreciative of it. we have a Seek, Speak, Listen website internally where we invite our teammates to post their Seek, Speak, and Listen moments. They're really, really inspiring and powerful. And one of them stands out to me, David, which is both heartbreaking and really encouraging. And this person wrote, I wrote it down so I wouldn't forget it. This person wrote, Seek, Speak, and Listen made me feel as though my opinion actually mattered, actually meant something. It's the first time I felt that in a really long time. That's the impact it has on an individual. And you multiply that by, potentially 140,000 people, suddenly feeling like their opinion matters, their voice matters. Just imagine the creativity that unlocks, the contribution, the engagement. It's incredibly powerful.
Yeah, there's something powerful about giving this the whole organization at once. And we heard from a fantastic researcher today who studies like system change, Jenny Cross from University of Colorado. And one of the things she taught me over the last few years is one of the biggest factors for creating habit change in people is people thinking everyone else is changing. And it's a huge effect. So there's this big non-obvious upside to kind of doing this all at once with everyone, where they feel like it's expected of them and that everyone else is doing it. It's this big positive social pressure. The dark side of it's called the panopticon effect, which is an unfortunate concept, but the positive side of it is this sort of positive social pressure that happens. It's really an incredible story. I remember the way we ended up kind of having you here today was you reached out to us and said a whole lot of your partners and customers and all this other people were kind of asking about it. Can you tell us a little bit about sort of how that came about, and then we'll share the data?
Well, yeah, I mean, it's just been such a privilege to do this work, to share it with our teammates and to see the outcomes we're getting from it. And our suppliers, our JVs, our subsidiaries are asking, can we have this too, right? This is so powerful and so simple and so easy to adopt. Can we have this too? And so we started talking again with NLI about this is a gift we can offer to the world. How do we bring this to life for others so that everyone can use it and benefit from it? It's because it's that powerful and we believe in it so much.
Yeah, fantastic. Well, let's look at the data. This is kind of a big reveal. And I have to say, when I first saw this data, I just had to sit quietly for like half an hour. It's this is really important to us in so many ways. Talk us through the data. Yeah.
So we do a quarterly pulse. So we track our progress with Seek, Speak, and Listen. And these are some of the results. That top line, 85% of our teammates say that they use these habits in their day-to-day interactions. 85% across the globe. It's phenomenal. When it comes to comfort speaking up, we're at about 74%. Obviously, we'd like that number to be higher. It's where we are now. We're making progress and we're going to continue to work on it. But what you'll see below there is pretty jaw-dropping. Our partners, our teammates in Southeast Asia saw a 31-point increase in their comfort speaking up after going through Seek, Speak, and Listen. And those are cultures, right, that tend to, where speaking up can be sort of countercultural, but Seek, Speak, and Listen made it safe, made it the right thing to do to speak up. So we saw a 31-point increase in Southeast Asia, a 14-point increase in India. Also, when it comes to seeking out new perspectives, and the question is something about seeking out perspectives when making decisions, seeking out different perspectives, we're at 68%. Again, we want this number to be higher. We know that this is a challenging habit for people, but look at the increase again that we saw in Southeast Asia, 24 points, and our teammates in Europe, Russia, and Israel saw a 15-point increase in their comfort seeking out new perspectives. That is, it's just so, we're moving in the right direction, and it's so rewarding to see those figures, and 2.4 million engagements among our employees with the Seek, Speak, and Listen materials.
Yeah, no, that's outstanding. That's the kind of shiver down my spine moment when we saw the delta here. There's some really amazing results. Let me change gears a little bit. I might take that data down and let's have a bit of a conversation. I'm sure Sonia and David have some questions and comments for you. It's the first time either of them have seen this data as well. So let's go to the panel. And then I've seen some great questions coming in from the audience. We're gonna have time to address a lot of them, not all of them. But we'll get to those in a few minutes as well. So maybe Sonia first, and then David, what are your reflections on change in weeks, not years, and the Boeing story?
Yeah, what resonated the most with me, Sara, was talking about how this really got to the kind of the heart of your organization and really seeking out feedback and input from, I think you said, those that felt, the most anxiety or nervousness about speaking up. Because what I have this really strong belief that across all organizations, in particular that middle part of the pyramid, there's just a treasure trove of ideas and thoughts and the growth mindset thinking that we just need to get it coming out. And that's really what resonated the most with me. I thought that was incredible to hear.
Yeah, Sonia, it's one of the implicit sort of acknowledgements in this work is that the intelligence to solve all of our problems resides in our teammates. It is there. It's our job to pull it out through that seeking habit and listening.
Yeah, it's a good catch, David.
Just first, congratulations. It's just incredible results. And obviously you've touched a lot of people and probably changed a lot of people's professional careers and hopefully learned something that'll help them outside. Two questions. One is, oftentimes the skill of listening is one that many aren't real accomplished at. They hear very well. Listening is different. We can all kind of test ourselves on how many times are we waiting to speak, formulating thoughts, or listening for understanding. And I think many people are often waiting to speak. Obviously, with the change in results you've seen, you've got a lot of people that are probably turning off their response on why whatever the person's saying is not right or whatever, and truly listening for understanding. So I'd love to understand a little bit more about how you've gotten those. What have you done? And the second question, if I get both of them, is outstanding results in Southeast Asia. And having lived and worked in Southeast Asia for a number of years, the change that you've delivered is truly impressive. I'd love to hear a little bit more about what you did to help people feel comfortable in an environment and in a culture where that's not typical.
It's a great question, David. And I'm going to start with that one, with the second one. Because to your point, that was one of the concerns going into Seek, Speak, and Listen is there are some cultures where speaking up is not favored and it's countercultural. And so one of the important things about the science of speaking up is you teach people why it's the right thing to do, why it may benefit their team and help the team succeed. And when people are empowered with that sort of as their North Star, it gives them the courage and the framework for speaking up. So just in the design of Seek, Speak, Listen, that framework, that helped a lot. And then I have to give credit to our leaders in Southeast Asia. We have incredible leaders who embraced Seek, Speak, and Listen, who set aside, our leader in Southeast Asia set aside a whole week separate from our 30-day sprint to focus on Seek, Speak, and Listen and really bring it to life. And that leadership, NLI has taught us, leaders are the most influential form of normative social change, and that has borne out for us. So that's sort of how I would answer the second part of your question. And the first part, how did we get to a place of stronger listening? It's a journey. We're certainly not perfect at it, but by calling out those things that distract us, right? By acknowledging, hey, we don't listen so well when we're multitasking, when we're getting IMs during meetings, when we're listening to respond as opposed to listening to learn. By just acknowledging those things and kind of navigating through it, I think it has helped people to be better listeners. And again, I give credit to the leaders at Boeing, many of whom go on Seek, Speak, and Listen listening tours, where they just get together with random teammates across our enterprise to listen to them. And it's a wonderful modeling of these habits, right? So huge credit to them.
Congratulations, very impressive.
That's great. And just to build on something that Sara kind of threw out early on, this the Seek, Speak, and Listen framework. And by the way, when was it launched? Someone asked that in the chat. When did it first come out?
It was May of last year.
May in 2021. Fantastic. So it's been out for less than a year. So the whole initiative is a custom version of research that we did for about 3 years on how do you create a culture of speaking up. And there's an off-the-shelf solution called Voice that's gone out across hundreds of thousands of people as well. But this was customized with specific videos and content, all this stuff. But to David's question, there's 100,000 ways to get it wrong, like to get teaching people to listen better wrong. There's very few ways to get it right, to teach people to listen better. And when you've only got kind of 5 minutes to get that across to people, what we do is we look deeply at the research. This is why it took 3 years. We look deeply at the research and say, what are the biggest insights that will have the biggest bang for your buck that will actually get large numbers of people listening differently? And so in the end, we carve back, in that short video, we carve back to just 2 or 3 things to focus on that we know from the research has the biggest effect. And honestly, it's a 2 or 3 year journey to answer that kind of question, really digging into the research in a deep, deep way. So simplicity is elegant and beautiful, and actually is really hard to get to. As we launched our empathy framework this morning, notice, understand, act. That took us 4 or 5 years to get to that level of simplicity. So, but there's a lot of kind of science under it. Sonia, any comments? Anything you wanted to dig into as well there before we change gears a bit?
Yeah, maybe I'll just say one thing. Kind of an interesting side note is I have found this incredibly helpful in parenting a teenager. So if I think about it, like there's so much. My son is 17, and there's so much pressure at school to be perfect. And what my husband and I have found is if we can just relieve that pressure, it's okay. Like he's more engaged, he's happier, not happy all the time. He even said thank you to me for kind of introducing this growth mindset thing to him, which was a shock. So I'll just say I found it be really incredible on a personal level as well.
No, fantastic. Thanks, Sonia. Let's take a few questions from the group for Sara, and then we've got questions for David and Sonia as well. So we've got a few minutes for questions to kind of dig in. So a couple of kind of tactical things, Sara, that came in, particularly like, did you roll this out? I mean, I think we talked about this. Did you roll this out to everyone all at once, or how did you deal with departments that said, hey, this isn't really a good time? And also kind of how did you handle new hires after? You tell us a little bit of the tactical without going too detailed, but a little bit of the tactical rollout plan there.
Yeah, absolutely. It's a great question. And, there was some hand wringing about, oh, this is not the great time. But we felt so strongly about the power of going all at once, to your point about the positive social pressure, and our CEO was backing it, which always helps. And so that's how we did it. The one thing that is nuanced that I'm sure others in the audience can relate to is we have a very large manufacturing and production workforce. So people who don't sit behind computers, who can't just go, click on a video and watch it. So we developed a parallel set of learning tools for those on the shop floor who could every day still go through this, but they go through it in a different way, not through video. And that was really important for us to bring these habits to life in a meaningful way for our production and maintenance workers.
Yeah, that's interesting. Quite a few questions coming up, Sara, around the application of this to underrepresented groups, to diversity, equity, and inclusion. I know you lead DEI at Boeing as well. Tell us about how this kind of landed for underrepresented groups, and also did you do anything differently for those, or tell us about some of that world.
Yeah, it's a great question. We sort of talk on our team about seek, speak, and listen also being a Trojan horse for inclusion. Because if you think about what you try to achieve through inclusion, it's about caring to hear from each other, listen to other people's perspectives, and actually value those perspectives such that you consider them when making decisions. And so we have been able to build this really strong foundation of care and respect through Seek, Speak, and Listen. And as I mentioned, I joined the company in 2019 as the Global Equity, Diversity, Inclusion leader. We were in such a crisis mode. It was hard to lift anything big off the ground solely about diversity and inclusion. We had to address this first, this aspect of our culture first, and then be able to build upon it. But we use Seek, Speak, and Listen in our racial equity training. We use Seek, Speak, and Listen when we talk about the solutions to closing representation gaps. It's so applicable to everything we do, and highly applicable to the diversity, equity, and inclusion work that I have the privilege of leading.
Yeah, and with the response from underrepresented groups, were they supportive of it and behind it, or what was the response from them?
Yeah, absolutely. I think that it has given a sort of non-controversial framework and vehicle for people to listen to each other differently, right? Where it's not about a diversity issue, but it's every single person's voice matters. And we don't leave this room until we've heard from every single person, because every person's voice matters. And so it's, I think there might have been some tension initially about, why are we focusing on this instead of that? But through this and seeing how widely the habits have been adopted and embraced, I think people have seen the power of the habits in applying to diversity, equity, and inclusion issues.
Right. Yeah, I'm a huge fan of the Trojan horse rather than the full frontal attack, where everyone gets damaged. The Trojan, a lot of our work kind of uses that principle in some ways. Early on, we learned that the most powerful leadership development solution for senior leaders was to give them someone they had to coach and teach them just enough that they had to, to start, and then teach them every week, literally. And we just, leaders become so much more effective when they kind of have to coach someone, and then they automatically apply it to their day-to-day leadership. We found that an amazing Trojan horse, and that was the kind of our work for about 10 years. And then we find with mitigating bias, if you come to us and say, hey, we really want to address, our diversity numbers, teach us how to mitigate bias, we're going to say, look, actually, let's teach everyone how to reduce bias in all kinds of decisions, starting with business decisions, so that we don't accidentally make dumb business decisions. And then naturally people will then apply that to people decisions, which we also teach, second. So, the Trojan horse, where you're not kind of hitting people, in the face with something, but then you actually give them exactly what they need, kind of give them something what they want, and then give them something that they need. So you're not having that, that resistance. There's a lot fewer arrows flying in every direction if you use the Trojan horse approach. So I'm definitely a big fan of that. There's a few other questions, but I actually want to ask some questions of all three of you, and some interesting ones coming in. So, one thing is kind of how have you held people accountable for these ideas? And Sonia, I know you're early in the journey, but even with growth mindset, is there any kind of mechanisms there as yet to kind of keep people accountable, or more just to keep reminding them about this? And then David, I'll ask you that as well. And then we'll go to you, Sara. How have you kind of thought about holding people accountable for this different way of working?
Yeah, so we've built it in as part of our whole performance management process in terms of understanding where we see our leaders really modeling this behavior. And I'll say there's been one other thing that's been quite powerful, being the CFO and the sponsor of this, is a lot of our leaders come to me for investment money. So it's really like an interesting way to look at it, to say, when you're coming and asking, I want to understand from you, where are you getting the ideas for this? What is the outcome going to be? I asked those leaders to bring in their team, because like I said, I want to hear from everyone on the team. And I find that to be a really interesting way to see the bigger picture when I get those investment asks.
Yeah, no, interesting. That's good to hear. David, what about you? How have you kind of tried to hold people accountable for a growth mindset? What have you done there?
We've tried to stay very, very focused on the outcome we want. Again, the growth mindset and the approach is how we do it, as opposed to the result is that you demonstrate, you ask yet a lot of times. What we found, though, is it actually led to outstanding changes, because to get to the outcomes we needed at the speed we needed in the categories and in the countries we operate, it required change, and it required people to engage the broader organization. So I'm a big fan of making sure that the few things you truly hold people accountable are outcome oriented, and that you get broad input to evaluating that performance in both organizational and business, whether it's sales, profit, cash, or it's the organizational satisfaction, because all of these can be turned into quantitative metrics. And then if there's a gap anywhere, then we look at the how, and then we would get specific to Is there something in the way you perform, the language you use, how you're engaging people, how you're listening to people? I heard someone one time say, amongst two type A personalities, the person that talks the slowest is declared the listener. We said, no, we haven't got it right yet. The whole idea is, if you truly value the individual, then you'd seek to understand, because you'd access the range of experiences and knowledge they have, and you'd have the benefit of that for decision making. And what happens is, in the feedback that we get, we'd uncover some of the biases and other barriers that people have to truly embracing people of difference, be it cultural, be it any difference. And to me, it's led to some tremendous growth on an individual level and then collectively with the organization. And it's manifest itself in stronger results and a stronger connection to the company. And attrition, the great resignation is not happening. We're single digit attrition, very different, very little change from where we were pre-pandemic. And I give credit to the fact, one, people are collectively winning, not individually driven, collectively winning, and their connection to the company and their pride in the company has gone up. And so the best way to keep people is to have them see what they're doing now and the people they work with to be something they don't want to leave.
Yeah, that's great. Thanks, David. As we wrap up, we've got about 3 minutes. As we wrap up, just addressing a couple of quick questions, then we'll hear a closing thought from each of you. There's a measurement question. So at NLI, we believe culture is about shared everyday habits, and literally what people do when they're in a conflict, what people do when a customer complains, what people do when they onboard a new person, right? What people do when someone asks them for money, which Sonia probably gets a lot, like the shared everyday habits, right? And in order to change those habits, there's a framework, make a set of priorities, build habits one at a time, install systems. And a couple of things that we've learned at high level, the priorities have to be super simple, and the simpler the better. And with Sara and Boeing, we got it down to 5 syllables. With Microsoft, we got it down to 6 words. And with many organizations, we've been able to get something that's actually very sticky, but still very meaningful. And we think that's the right way to create the priorities. They probably last 5 years, maybe 10 at the most. We've had some companies that have changed them after like 6-7 years. They're not perennial necessarily. And these commitments or principles or values become the thing people focus on for a good period of time and really change the culture. But a key thing about measurement, what we really want to measure is literally the number of people applying these habits weekly. Because if we're in the habit business, then we should be asking, is this a habit? Kind of crazy idea. So we have a whole approach to that. And if you kind of want to learn more about that, watch the recorded session on behavior change at scale today. It was a really rich, amazing session with our head of customer experience, plus 2 other global thought leaders in behavior change at scale. So for us, we want to see habits really, really change. And the case here from Boeing of a custom solution that the entire company could go through at the same time is an incredibly powerful strategy for doing that. But you can also do that completely off the shelf with all sorts of different directions, from growth mindset to inclusion to bias, many other things. But for me, I'm super thrilled to be able to share the Boeing story. It's a great example of over a long time, the research having a real impact. And it's made this, last year probably incredibly rewarding for me in so many ways. So Sara, I'm super grateful for you being able to get permission to tell the story here first. I know this is one of the first kind of public outings of the story. So thank you for doing that. And Sonia, thank you so much for being willing to be here at the early stages of the journey and share, your experience so far, and definitely added some great context. And David, thanks for everything you've done in the last few years in creating an authentic growth mindset. It sounded like I was saying how amazing the CEO of Avanade is, but I really do believe you activate an authentic growth mindset as well in the organization. All the interactions we've had with your people truly are not weaponizing it, although that can happen at times. They're truly changing their mindset. So it's really been an awesome experience. So any closing comments? Sara, I guess first, and then David, and then Sonia. Any closing comments as we wrap up?
Oh gosh, this has been such a rich conversation. So thank you, David, for the invitation. And I started my remarks sharing about the sentiment in 2019, and the sort of transformation we've been on since then is really profound. From the grief, the fear, the worry, to a place where we feel empowered at an individual level and at an institutional level to be transparent, to be humble, to demonstrate care for each other, because we know those are the things that will lead us not only to survive, but to thrive. It's just so enriching, so rewarding. And I'm so grateful for the partnership with NLI and so grateful to the teams at Boeing who have made it happen.
Fantastic. Thanks so much, Sarah. It's been a very meaningful collaboration. I look forward to continuing the journey together. Thank you for all you're doing there. And David, any closing comments there?
Just to reinforce how powerful it is. While it's simple, it's extraordinarily powerful when applied at scale. And I believe this is one of those things that's a journey. If you truly have the growth mindset, you never get all the way there, but you have some wonderful stops along the way that you can celebrate and recognize the people that are driving the organization and making it work. So we're excited about it. We believe we're early in the journey of what's possible to unleash the human capacity in our company. And that's one that is very inspiring to me and I think many others.
Thanks, David. It's great. One of the insights we had just coming into the summit is growth mindset is super important as a foundation, and growth skill set is probably coming next. So what are the actual skills that you need to really learn quickly? And we're starting to think about that as well. Thanks for everything that you're doing there, David. And Sonia, closing remarks.
Yeah, I'll just say thank you. It has been an incredible privilege to be on this panel, and I am so inspired, David and Sara, by your stories and how much further we have to go at Avanade, and incredible use of investment funds. So it's been great. Thank you.
From the CFO, we love that.
Yes.
Thank you so much. Thanks very much, Sonia, Sara, David. Really appreciate your contributions, and thanks for making the time to share these stories with everyone. This will be very meaningful for a lot of people. So thank you. Take care of yourselves. Look after each other. Keep doing what matters, and we'll connect again soon. Thanks so much. Take care. Everyone else, stay on. We're going to go to a closing few minutes. Thanks so much. Bye-bye. All right, we're going to change channel, and do we have Janet with us?
I'm here.
Fantastic. Janet is back. Give me a moment. We'll share screen. I need kind of a moment to compose myself after that, in a way. It was I'm a little emotional, I have to admit.
Just breathe. Adapt. There you go.
It's a lot, right? It's
it is.
It's the Boeing story, just in particular, is so moving. In particular, just the way that we were actually able to follow the science completely there. We had the trust and willingness to actually really follow the science and do it exactly the way we know it should be done. And it really, really worked. So
it's really powerful.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely.
So let's Sara, you could be free to stay. Sonia, David, you're free to drop off, but we're going to jump to the closing comments now of the summit. Thanks again for everything that you've done, and look forward to connecting again soon. So Janet, take us away. Tell us about the where we are towards the end.
We are, and it has been an amazing 2 days. So thank you and welcome back. And thank you for going through these 2 days with us and for being our co-creators, for exploring and learning from all these wonderful themes that we looked at for these 2 days. We've had some time to reflect. We've had some space to contribute, some opportunities to develop some new insights. We've had a chance to create a lot of new things. And I think our theme was very appropriate, not just for these 2 days, but for the time that we find ourselves in, because we adapted really fast to whatever it took to get through these 2 days on our side, to the new ideas we saw, to the people we met, we made new connections. We found a whole lot of new insights. And just think about the people who were actually here with us for this journey. There were a huge number of different organizations, 1,200 organizations, over 2,000 attendees, 10,000 people streaming from 57 different countries. Those insights that we heard came from all kinds of organizations all around the world, a diversity of people, a diversity of organizations, a diversity of thought. And I'll wager we had a lot of different insights. If you recall from the opening, David walked us all through NLI's Eureka Scale. So what I want you to think about now is I want you to think a little bit about what are some of your level 4s and 5s. And I'll tell you a little bit how the first day went for me. If you think back to day one, we focused on insights from the lab a lot. We kicked things off with a discussion about moving beyond the survival mode, because we've been there for so long, it seems. But then we also explored ways to actually do it, from adopting a growth mindset and building resilience and trust, to rethinking where we work and how we work together. Well, for me, the greatest insights from day one, and I'll be a little biased here because it was the session I was in. But anyway, the greatest insights for me from day one had to do with understanding how we actually leverage our power in the moment, recognizing that our power can be different. You know, we always think that certain people have power. It depends. It's relative. And understanding how we leverage it for good, to support each other in those spaces we inhabit as those spaces change. That to me is what adapting is about. So those are my thoughts on day one. David, what do you think? How did day two go for you? What's coming up?
Thanks, Janet. You know, for day one, for me, the level 4 insight was really strong, was around the framework for regenerative practice. And we talked a lot about getting from depletive to sustainable, but then actually to regenerative, and the habits. We launched the habits for that. Expand your perspective, challenge your thinking, commit to action. And we just saw how actually adapting faster, those are relevant to adapting faster across the board. And we really, really need to do those well so that we can get to regenerative practices. That was a really big insight for me. And I loved the From the Lab sessions, because I love all the new science. There's some amazing science in there. I want to watch both of those sessions a few times. These are all available for the next 30 days to participants to watch. So I really encourage you to get in. And then to corporate members, they're available openly for your membership. So that's another option to consider. So that was day one. Day two, we started today with Connecting in a Disconnected World, and launched a new framework for thinking about empathy and thinking of it as a quality connection. We've talked for years about quality conversations, and empathy is a quality connection where you accurately interpret people's emotions and intentions and actions, and then act adaptively. And we developed a really 3 or 4 years of research into defining this as notice, understand, act. And sometimes simplicity takes a long time. So we came out with a way to think about teaching or building empathy at scale, which is very exciting. And then I think just the utility of that really jumped out for me. And then again, From the Lab sessions are the big insights for me in both of those sessions as well. What about for you, Janet? What stood out for you today in the sessions?
I actually stepped through a couple of them. And of course, since I tend to be single-minded about things, it was a lot of the diversity, equity, and inclusion sessions, just is. But one session I sat through was really interesting. I actually ended up posting my insights on our hashtag. So they're already out there in the world. And a couple of statements. One of them was, when you talk about DEI, it was, if you aren't measuring, then it's a hobby. To say that about a company, if you're not measuring diversity, equity, and inclusion, if you don't have metrics, it's a hobby. That's what I'm going to get that, put on a screen someplace to remind people. I'm definitely going to make a slide for us. But so those kinds of things, and just listening to people who have taken our solutions. And in that case, it was people who had either done a PHS study with us or would look using Decide, just to listen to how those things are being used in real organizations. It's just amazing to me that something this simple, I mean, like you said, it's hard to get stuff simple, but it's there. And as we were saying, when Boeing was talking about getting it just down to 3 syllables, it's hard to believe that something that simple can make such a difference. And that to me is an incredible insight. So, I want to keep making it simple as much as possible. Yeah, no, fantastic. Thanks so much. So, we'd like to give you a few minutes to reflect on your insights, and what would be wonderful is put them in the chat and you post them. There's the hashtag 2022 NLS, NeuroLeadership Summit, hashtag 2022 NLS. And we're going to give you a minute to reflect, and maybe you can put a number against your insight. Yeah, whether it's a 4 or 5. Whatever it was. Yeah. Let's give you a moment to do that. We'll give you a moment of quiet, and then we're going to come back with a couple of really important things. So stay with us and scroll through other people's insights. Really fascinating to see. Stay with us. We've got another couple of minutes, less than 5 minutes. Scroll through other people's insights. Let's take a quiet moment to reflect. What were your biggest insights over these 2 days?
See a few interesting things coming in there. Bring the day 2 back up. There you go. We can go through, we can show you day 1 and 2.
There you go.
There's 2.
Jog your memory a little bit.
There's day 1. There's 2. There's a level 5 insight on yet. Different types of empathy activate different brain. There's 1 again. And oh, I stand corrected, 90 days of access to the videos, not 30 days. I think that decision was literally made today based on feedback, and we adapted faster.
Yeah,
so
we do that.
And they'll be housed on this platform, I understand.
Mm-hmm.
So you'll be able to just come back. You'll get a fantastic. Thanks very much, everyone, for sharing your insights, and really appreciate your contributions. Janet, we've got some closing comments.
We do. Well, I want to start by acknowledging all of our wonderful speakers. You were insightful. You gave us your insights. You helped us develop insights of our own, and you helped us build a better normal. And so what we're going to do to help you build a better normal in your name is we're going to contribute to several charities in your name and on your behalf. So we're making donations in the name of each of our speakers to several organizations. Right now, the ones we're looking at are the Pajama Program, the Brain Research Foundation, Pets for Vets, and the Climate Reality Project. We want to make a better place and make this world a better place, and we're happy to help you do that. You're already doing it. We're just going to put a little money behind it and help you do it more. It has been an absolute pleasure and an honor for me to serve as this year's MC. And I look forward to seeing you not only here again, but after this, out in the world doing things. And in fact, I'm going to turn it back over to David to close us out here. And he's going to tell you a little bit about what's next and where we'll be seeing you.
We just threw this up again, trying to adapt faster. People were saying, how do we stay connected? How do we stay connected? Every Friday, and we don't have one this Friday, but starting next week, every Friday we have what we call Your Brain at Work Live. And we have sometimes thousands of people there, always hundreds. And we talk about different topics. The first one, we're actually going to do a kind of debrief on the summit of the big insights, a refresh and kind of recollection for folks who couldn't be there, but also folks who were, to kind of really see the shape of it in a whole new way. So every Friday you can reconnect with us. It's on a Zoom platform. That also turns into a podcast if you can't be there, to kind of hear the key pieces from that. So it's not on every week, but most weeks we have what's called Your Brain at Work Live, with many, many different guests and many, many different topics. We've got some really exciting topics coming up over the next couple of months. And then the big reveal, we've been thinking a lot about just how hard we've been going and how fast we've been going. And I made the executive decision, being the executive, to give our team a little breathing time. And the next summit, I want to tell you, is going to be November next year. So we're, this is our big summit for this year. We're going to do a lot of smaller in-person events as that becomes possible, probably all around the world. We're going to shift gears to getting people together where we can, going to keep the Friday sessions, but the next big summit will be November next year. And we're going to do what we plan to do for this one, which is we're actually going to do an in-person event in New York and a parallel virtual summit that will be obviously working with all the content. We've learned a ton about doing both, so we're going to put it together. The final date will come out soon, but most likely in the first half of November 2023, all going well, and hopefully it will. So thank you so much, everyone. Janet, a huge thank you for all your work behind the scenes and on the stage. You've been incredible. We've had lots of opportunities to adapt faster together, and I really appreciate your collaboration and partnership. And to everyone else, thank you so much for being here. Thank you for your attention and interest and insights. And I'll close with something I've been saying since March last year, and that's still really important to me, and that's take care of yourself. Firstly, you've got to do that probably better than you ever have. You've got to set those boundaries and get clearer and manage that brain better than ever. Take care of yourself. Secondly, look after each other. You've got to do that better than ever. And that's not going away anytime soon. Look after each other. And the third is keep delivering what matters. Don't try to do everything. Just focus on what matters. And what mattered for us is delivering a powerful experience to generate level 4 and 5 insights. And it looks like we've achieved that. So thank you, the whole NLI team behind the scenes with incredible work. Janet and everyone else, wish you well. And we'll see you again November next year. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.